Let me give you a couple of in the news that's happening, and I want to do a couple things for you tonight. As I peruse some of the things that come in through the emails for me, a lot of people send me pieces of in the news, and when they send them to me, they're listening. All over the world, they're listening to this, and so I want to read just a couple of them. Most of them are mine, but this is one that came from one of you. It's actually Shad. He told me about it last night, but this is kind of interesting. I don't have it up on screen for you tonight, but I do want to bring you up to snuff where we're at. Let me hold four things here and do this at once. But I want to tell you about some in the news. This one's kind of interesting. NASA is telling us that there is an asteroid that's headed towards us, not to harm us. It's not going to come that close. But listen to this. It says NASA headed toward giant golden asteroid that could make everyone on Earth a billionaire. This is kind of interesting. NASA is eyeing up a nearby asteroid that contains enough gold to make everyone on Earth a billionaire. Psyche 16 is nestled between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, and it's made of solid metal. As well as gold, the mysterious object is loaded with heaps of platinum, iron, and nickel. And so he told me that actually, here's what it's worth. They believe it's worth a gargantuan 10,000 quadrillion dollars. Now, here's the deal. The first thing he told me when he told me that, I said, that's worthless. He said, why? I said, because if you made everybody on Earth a billionaire, everything would be worth nothing. It would kill every economy. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what they said. So what they're doing is they're sending a probe, but in sending that probe, there's two companies right now that are looking to go up there before NASA gets there to mine the gold. And so it's kind of interesting. You just can't stop people sometimes. Here's another one. Somebody sent me this one, and I actually said this to you, but she sent this. She heard it. She's from Australia. I believe this is, let me see who this is. This is Lou from Australia, who hears this every day, every time we put it on. She said that I was talking about when you see a big tech company finally getting a cryptocurrency, then you're going to know that it's very, very close. Facebook has finally revealed the details of its cryptocurrency, Libra, which will let you buy things or send money to people with nearly zero fees. Your pseudonym will buy the cash out of your Libra online or at a local exchange point like grocery stores and spend it using interoperable third-party wallet apps or Facebook's own app that will be built into WhatsApp, Messenger, and its own app. Today, Facebook is having a white paper explaining Libra, and it's for working out the kinks of its blockchain system before a public launch in the first half of 2020. So I told you it was coming, and it is coming. By the way, that was from Pam, excuse me. This next one is from Lou. She's from Australia. Pam, I think, is from England. And she said this one, UK appeals court overturns order for mentally disabled woman to have an abortion. It's absolutely unbelievable. 3 days after a British court ordered a developmentally disabled woman to have an abortion against her and her mother's wishes, she didn't want it, neither did her mother, an appeals court overturned that decision, the mother's lawyer said Monday. Last week, a judge had ruled that an abortion was in the best interest of the unidentified woman who is in her 20s, lives in London, and has the mental capacity of a 9-year-old, according to evidence presented in court. The woman is 22 weeks pregnant, and the court was told that the circumstances of the pregnancy were unclear. British news media reported that a police investigation was underway. In her ruling on Friday, Justice Natalie Levine of the Court of Protection said that although the case was heartbreaking, she had to act in the woman's best interests, not on society's views of termination. The woman's mother challenged the ruling, and on Monday, 3 Court of Appeal judges overturned it, confirmed her lawyer, John McKendrick. He said the judges granted his client's appeal after an emergency last-minute hearing. The court set aside Ms. Justice Levine's decision and ruled it was not in her best interest to have the termination. He wrote in an email. He said the woman will continue in her pregnancy. The 3 appeals court judges, Justice Richard Bucombe, Justice Eleanor King, and Peter Jackson, have yet to file a written decision on the case. A spokeswoman for the Court of Appeals said, that is absolutely unbelievable that you would have a court deciding whether you can have a baby or not, especially when you want to have that baby. Come on, somebody say amen. So I just want to thank Lou from Australia who sent that to us. Let me give you a little bit more of in the news if I can find my pointer here. I look like the absent-minded professor tonight, don't I? Here you go. Let's talk about the New World Order and what's happening there. This kind of is upsetting for some people, but I want to just let you hear it in a moment. I've been telling you about DNA, and I've been telling you about 23andMe. How many of you know about 23andMe and DNA? Well, the unholy alliance between DNA sites and facial recognition. Technology that was once only seen in dystopian science fiction is rapidly infecting real life. 2 means of collecting personal data, DNA databases and facial recognition software, are forming an unholy alliance, and the privacy implications could be devastating. Privacy concerns surrounding DNA and facial recognition aren't anything new. As the popularity of DNA genealogy websites like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe increase, let me put something in here. If you've done that, and a lot of us have, there's a little blurb on the bottom of their thing you signed that says they own the rights to your DNA, which means they can do anything they want with it. And right now they're doing anything they want with it. So let me tell you what this article says without reading it all to you. So there was a criminal case, I believe in Colorado, and they had some DNA at the site. And from the DNA, they took the DNA and they had broken down the factors in the DNA, and your DNA can tell how far your eyes are from each other, how far your nose is. It can actually paint a picture of a face. So they got a picture from a DNA sample, they put it into their database, which they connected with it, and it pulled up a facial recognition of the criminal. And they caught him. Now that might sound great to be able to catch a criminal, and obviously that's the reason why they're going to push it. But imagine if this technology not only can be used to solve crimes, but imagine it for less honorable purposes. So if the Antichrist system comes, and it will come, there's going to be a time when hiding from the Antichrist is going to be an absolute almost impossibility. So it could tell you about why so many will be beheaded during that time. It's a scary thing to think about, but you cannot hide anymore. There's no way you can do it. And so your facial recognition, yours and mine, are on many police cameras right now. Matter of fact, some of the cameras, I'll read you another article in a moment, actually have glasses that they're putting out right now that can read your face and send it to a database while they're looking at you in a crowd. So the technology is absolutely unbelievable. Let me also give you this one. Emergency security threats, and this goes right along with it, at half-year mark. 5G, now 5G, how many know what 5G is? How many do not know what 5G is? All right, have our expert explain it. He did it last night. Yeah, go ahead. Tell us what it is.
It's a spectrum of bandwidth basically in the air that transmits data over a wireless network.
Yeah, it sounds simple for him to say because it is, he knows it, but here's what it is, and he's right. That data has to fit a bandwidth. And so 2G came out and the bandwidth was this big, 3G this big, 4G this big. Right now we're dealing with 4G. How does that affect you? Well, your TV is a better TV right now because there's more data they can throw in that bandwidth. Am I correct? And so now when 5G comes out, your TVs will be even better, and so will all your communications. So that 5G network that's coming is pretty powerful because it can put a lot of information into one bandwidth. So listen to this. 5G is going to touch every company and person in the next year or two as service providers drive new high bandwidth offerings. But currently, as discussed in a Beltway conference a few weeks ago, raising the anxiety of the audience, China is the only country that manufactures the full stack of 5G solutions, from chips and handsets to core infrastructure. It's a troubling situation, as in particular, there are many security concerns around Chinese technological providers. For example, tech heavyweight Huawei, how many have heard of Huawei? Is the world's largest telecom supplier and second largest phone supplier. Most of us have our phones from Huawei, believe it or not, and has long been suspected of providing products that compromise customer security and privacy. Why? Because they're owned by the Chinese Communist government. And so Huawei has almost 80% of the police force in the United States has Huawei equipment. This can obviously take that data and send it back to China anytime it wants. So I told you about China wanting to be a superpower. I told you about the Thucydides effect, how they rise up, the nation will rise up. China is on its way. And let me tell you, it's on its way not because of all the technology it has, because it does, it reverse engineers everything it gets from us. Trump is absolutely right to slap as many tariffs as he possibly can on China because they're coming up faster than you can believe it, and they have more security devices around our United States than any of our United States companies have. And so the Chinese government, they easily share that with. And so when we see China, remember, these are the kings of the East. These are the ones, and I'll tell you about in a moment, these are the ones the Bible prophesies is going to do something in the last days that's absolutely major. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about something that's right at the very core of our technology, and at the core of our headlines, and at the core of biblical prophecy. So let me give you this one. Trump discards, and we'll talk about Israel for a moment. Something's big coming out of Israel, and I think it may happen very, very soon. But this thing is fairly large also. When the New York Times decided to give the Democratic presidential candidates a chance to answer 18 policy questions in a video essay, the only one that touched the Middle East went as follows. Do you think Israel meets international standards of human rights? So the New York Times is anti-Semitic. It always has been. And so they asked this question, which is absolutely ridiculous, because they have nations around them that are chopping people's heads off. And they're asking if Israel follows or meets international standards of human rights. They asked the 18 Democratic candidates. They had to boil it down from the thousands that are running, I guess. That question summed up the anti-Israel bias of the so-called newspaper on record, and as well as anything it has ever published. A few of the candidates gave the correct answer to the question, which was yes, they do meet those standards. Give credit to Senators Kamala Harris, Kristen Gillibrand, Michael Bennet, and former Congressman John Delaney for prefacing their remarks by saying that. But the other 18, including frontrunner Joe Biden, he chose not to participate. You know why? Because Joe Biden is about as smart as that pulpit right there. He's about as smart as a piece of wood. And basically he should keep his mouth shut. It's the only way he's going to get elected. Because every time he opens his mouth, he sticks all 5 of his feet in it. I don't know how he got 5 feet, but he got them. Well, anyway, the rest of them, and I don't want to give you my opinion on him. I'm just telling you this. So the rest of them failed to do so, and instead used it as an excuse to criticize the government of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while expressing sometimes equivocal sympathy for the Jewish state mixed with the belief that it wasn't doing all it could for peace or human rights. Almost all bashed the Trump administration's approach to Israel. Almost all seem to define the relationship in a way that hinges support for Israel on factors other than the shared values that they united the two countries. The most forthright of these critics is Pete Buttigieg. I'm so sick of hearing his name. He should never be running for president. I don't even know how he's a candidate. The popular mayor of South Bend, and his answer to the Times. Buttigieg notes that he wouldn't move the U.S. Embassy back to Tel Aviv. Well, thank you so much. From Jerusalem, he says what's done is done. He says, but what he really doesn't like about Trump's policy is that the president conceives of the relationship as between two friends rather than the carrot and stick approach used by President Barack Obama and every other U.S. president before him. Now, there he's right. The carrot and stick approach to Israel has always been this, and every president has done it, Democratic and Republican. We'll do this for you if you do this for us. If we do this for us, if you have a peace over here, even though you don't like the terms of it with the Palestinians, and we give you billions of dollars, then you'll do that because we'll do this. And Trump is not that way. He's not paying them to do something. He is honorably looking at what is right to do for Israel. Well, no one likes it. I like it. Somebody say you like it. Well, I like it. Buttigieg says this, if you're going to give somebody something they've wanted, even with a strong ally like Israel, you don't do that without getting some kind of concession. Would you treat me like that? Would you say, here, I want to give you this, but I want something in return? No, he's saying that's what we want to do. You don't give anything to Israel if you don't get something in return. Buttigieg, and he says this, and he flatly warned that if Israeli government did something he didn't like if he were to become president, such as extending Israel's law into some of the settlements in the West Bank, then he would punish the nation by withholding aid. You would punish one of our greatest allies, one of the greatest democracies in the Middle East that's keeping the Middle East together. That's a good reason, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, not to vote for that man for anything, even dog catcher. Don't vote for him. I'm getting really excited tonight. I'm not even sure why, but I am. Let me just give you a little bit more. Let's go to war, because I have a bunch of them on this. I showed you these maps. And I showed you about the Strait of Hormuz, and I showed you about the Persian Gulf, and I told you that that's a hot spot. I told you that 19% of the world's oil comes through that. Actually, that's a lowball estimate. I just recently heard that may be up to 30% of the world's oil. Somebody said, well, we don't need it because we're self-sustaining. We now have self-sustaining oil. That's true, but we take this oil and we resell it. And the reason why we resell it, it's a great profit thing for America, because everybody who buys oil in the world has to buy it with American dollars. So it still can cripple our economy. So there is a showdown going on there. The U.S., and this article came out, that's a fuzzy picture because that's the way it's taken. It's a surveillance picture. Nuclear changes, more troops heighten U.S. and Iran conflict. The U.S. and Iran edged towards a flashpoint this past Monday as Tehran announced it was breaking compliance with the accord that keeps it from making nuclear weapons. Well, of course they're breaking it. They've always been breaking it. I told you about them spinning their centrifuges and taking that U-235 atom, spinning off those isotopes so that they can have an enriched uranium core so they can have a nuclear weapon. They said that along with Trump's administration following by an order of 1,000 more troops in the Middle East. The Pentagon said that deployment includes security forces and troops for additional surveillance and intelligence gathering in the region. Although the number is small, it represents an escalation in U.S. military might aimed at deterring Iran and calming allies worried that the transit through key shipping lanes, which I showed you, could be in jeopardy, and they are. Tehran's announcement earlier Monday means it could soon start to enrich uranium to just a step away from weapons-grade levels, challenging President Donald Trump's assurances to allies that the U.S. withdrawal from the deal last year made a world a safer place. The developments are bound to inflame tensions in the Middle East and pose a test of resolve and credibility for both adversaries. I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to continue to tell you this, and I'm not Chicken Little telling you the sky's falling. Something big is going to happen in the Middle East, and it's going to happen soon. Israel will never let Tehran get a nuclear weapon. We know that Iran is a rogue nation. They are threatening the entire Middle East. They always have. If they have a nuclear weapon, you know what they said in 1982 when they were trying to develop nuclear weapons? They said, once we get one nuclear weapon, we are throwing it at Israel. We're going to wipe them off the face of the map. Their first nuclear weapons going to Israel. I promise you, Israel's not going to wait for the United States to do anything. Israel's going to go in there and they're going to take it out. And the Bible talks about a nuclear exchange. You want to talk about fervent heat and men's skin melting off their face? That's talking about a nuclear exchange. And it's going to happen somewhere in the Middle East. You look at Revelation, it'll tell you about that. Okay, this one also goes on and says this: will Iran unleash Hezbollah terrorists on U.S. soil? So we know about Hezbollah. We know that they are totally against Israel. We know their whole charter as a terrorist nation, as a terrorist organization, is to push Israel into the sea and to wipe them out. We know for a long time that Iran has been funding them. But this article will tell you a couple extra things. If the U.S. goes to war with Iran, we won't just be fighting the Iranian military. In recent years, Hezbollah has grown into the most powerful terror organization the world has ever seen. It is best known for causing all sorts of chaos in the Middle East, but today it has an extensive presence in Europe, Africa, Latin America, and North America. Hezbollah has made billions selling drugs inside the United States. And at one point, they had more than 70 used car dealers in this country through which they were laundering drug money. I'm going to tell you, when I read that, it brought me back to a man that I met years ago in the center of Birmingham, who was a used car dealer, who was Iranian, who I suspected was some type of terrorist. And I'm going to tell you, I didn't just do that off the top of my head. He was extremely shady. He didn't have any really care about the cars that were there. It seemed like it was just a front. Anyway, so it goes on to say this. Of course, the primary source of funding for Hezbollah is Iran. The terror organization was founded in 1985 with a heavy support from Iran. According to the Wikipedia, most of its financial, training, weapons, explosives, political, diplomatic, and organizational aid currently comes from the Iranians. And right now, Trump is putting on such tariffs to the Iranians that they're not able to actually fund Hezbollah, which is really amazing. It's great. But in essence, Hezbollah is Iran's terror arm, one of their proxies. And so if we go to war with Iran, we will find ourselves in a conflict with Hezbollah as well. Most Americans have absolutely no idea what a full-blown conflict with Hezbollah will look like. For a moment, just imagine thousands of extremely well-trained terrorists shooting up and blowing up soft targets all across America. The sheer panic would immediately paralyze our entire society. But Iran always knew that if Hezbollah started conducting terror attacks in the United States, that we would blow them off the map. We made it exceedingly clear that we would hold Iran responsible for whatever Hezbollah did. And that prevented Hezbollah from hitting U.S. targets over the last couple of decades. However, if the U.S. and Iran get engaged in a full-blown war in the Middle East and the missiles start flying all over the place, there won't be any reason for Hezbollah to hold back any longer in the United States. And last Friday, we literally came within 10 minutes of war with Iran. The following comes from Fox News. President Trump confirmed early Friday that he called off a retaliatory attack on Iran in response to the downing of a U.S. drone 10 minutes before the strike, saying the number of expected casualties was not proportionate to what Tehran did. In a stunning tweet thread, the president said the U.S. was locked and loaded to retaliate, with plans to hit 3 sites. But he reversed course after asking military leaders about how many would be killed. Let me tell you something. It's probably one of the smartest moves he ever made. It really is a smart move. You retaliate weaponry from weaponry. And I know there's a lot of John Birchers out there that want to say, just kill them right now. But believe me, it'll unleash a firestorm on both sides. President Donald Trump warned the United States may launch a devastating military attack on Iran unless it comes to the negotiating table and drops its bid to develop nuclear weapons. So it's not off the table. Unlike our wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, if there is a war with Iran, it won't just be limited to the Middle East. Iran has an extremely sophisticated intelligence network of their own, and everyone agrees that they have many agents deeply embedded inside the United States. In fact, late last year, 2 of them were arrested and charged with espionage. The U.S. has charged 2 alleged agents of Iran, accusing them of conducting covert surveillance of Israeli and Jewish facilities in the United States and collecting intelligence on Americans linked to a political organization that wants to see the current Iranian government overthrown. Earlier this week, Amardreo Dudstar 38, a dual U.S.-Iranian citizen. They don't just come here and migrate, they get citizenship. Born in Long Beach, California, this one was born there, and Majid Gorbi, 59, who has lived and worked in Costa Mesa, California since he arrived in the United States in the mid-90s, were charged with acting as illegal agents for Tehran. Gorbani became a permanent resident of the United States in 2015. But without a doubt, Hezbollah is even a greater terror threat. If you are not familiar with Hezbollah, here's a pretty good overview from the Heritage Foundation. Hezbollah regards terrorism not only as a useful tool for advancing its revolutionary agenda, but it also has a religious duty as part of a global jihad. It helped to popularize the tactic of suicide bombings in Lebanon in the 1980s. It developed a strong guerrilla force and a political apparatus in the 1990s. It provoked a war with Israel in 2006. It intervened in the Syrian civil war in 2011 at Iran's direction, and has become a major destabilization force and influence in the ongoing Arab-Israeli conflict. Hezbollah has murdered, you ready for this, more Americans than any other terrorist group has ever done before September 11, 2001. So you're watching something really take shape. And along with that, let's talk about the nations and the rumors of wars and nations going against nations, as Jesus told us in Matthew 24. China and Russia growing closer. That picture, it says it all. At a meeting at Tajikistan last weekend, Russian President Vladimir Putin presented Chinese President Xi Jinping with a large box of ice cream and a couple of other items in celebration of Xi Jinping's 66th birthday. The nations have developed a close trading relationship in recent years, and the 2 leaders have developed a close personal friendship. When presenting the gift, President Putin commented, "Happy birthday to my best wishes. I am delighted to have you as a friend. Our whole team and our whole country can say that. We wish you all the best in the world because you're doing so much to develop the relations between our 2 countries." After a 3-day visit to Russia the previous week, Xi Jinping referred to Putin as his best friend. That's not good news. These 2 leaders represent 2 of the 27 nations sending delegates to the 5th summit of the Conference on Interaction and Conference Building Measures in Asia last week. Russia and China have recently signed a comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation agreement. These events occurred as the United States continues to increase pressure on China and other conference participants such as Iran and Turkey. Bible prophecy indicates that in the last days there will be a military threat from the area north and east of Jerusalem, and that a massive end-time army will eventually descend on the Holy Land from that direction. This 200 million man militia will require a huge population base as well as a tremendous financial, military, and transportation resources to make the trek across Asia at some point in the future. These 2 current leaders, Xi Jinping and Putin, are certainly not plotting the creation of a massive end-time army. However, the God who removes kings and raises up kings will carry out his prophecies, and there's no doubt working through these 2 men to make sure nations are positioned when the time is right. What does that mean? Well, if China wants to march a 200 million man militia across Asia, they're going to have to cross several different countries unless they go the Russia route. Russia has 11 time zones. It stretches all the way from the Ukraine all the way to Manchuria, which is right above China. All China has to do is take a Russian route and they can go there. Let me also tell you this. China's economy is bolstering. It's amazing. Russia's economy is terrible. It's flattening. So they have all the weaponry, they have all the men, they have all the resources, and now even the land bridge to do what the Bible has talked about thousands of years ago. Let me give you a little bit more as we continue to talk about war. Tensions rise in the waters off China now. The Taiwan Strait and other waters off China are becoming areas of increasing confrontation. The United States naval vessels have patrolled these waters in the name of keeping them open for international shipping. A recent near miss between a U.S. guided missile cruiser and a Russian destroyer has added to already heightened tensions in the regions. Man, how many near misses can we have? This was June 7th, by the way. Now, the U.S. is now working on a $2 billion military arms sale to Taiwan to upgrade its tank battalion and missile defenses, an action China is very displeased with. Now, Germany, in a surprise move, is seriously considering sending one of its own warships through the Taiwan Strait, which would break its decades-old policy of non-confrontation. The world is increasingly unsettled, and boy, didn't the Bible tell us that? Nation against nations. And nations have maintained a modicum of peace for the last few decades, are now moving in opposite directions. Global relationships are changing and new geopolitical alliances are forming. In a number of situations, regional alliances are forming to counteraction by other nations. Bible prophecy indicates that 3 major regional alliances will emerge as we approach the end of the age. A Middle Eastern king of the south, a European king of the north, and the kings from the east. China is likely to be central to the kings from the east. And we know that Germany may be the nucleus, along with Russia, from kings to the north. So we're watching Bible prophecy happen. Here's another one that I found just today, and I wanted to read this one to you. It's culture wars. We're going to have a little bit in the news tonight. Scotland. Traffic signals changed to homosexual transgender symbols for Scotland's Pride March. A series of green traffic signals along the Pride Parade route in Edinburgh have been replaced with a range of diversity in images. 4 designs have been created to represent lesbian, gay, trans, and straight relationships using recognized gender symbols on 35 lights. I don't know about you, but if you give me more than 3 lights, I'm not getting a crash. Especially if they have people on them that I don't recognize. Oklahoma City School District invites students to walk alongside school bus in Pride Parade. A 3rd year in a row, Oklahoma City Public Schools plans to participate in the upcoming homosexual and transgender Pride Parade. It's inviting students and their parents to walk along the school bus that will be a part of the procession. Seattle, breast binder raffle drag show held at Public Library for Teen Pride. The event is described as a pride celebration designed by teens for teens, and the most rainbow-filled fun you can imagine, I'm quoting. It includes activities like open mic and karaoke. Other activities listed are presentations on safer sex, a drag show, and advice panels for teenagers, and a free binder raffle. I know you don't know what that is, so I'll explain it. The event page says that Saturday's gathering is suitable for tweens and teens, meaning ages 10 to 19. Planned Parenthood will be providing the sex ed programs for the event. Transgender identifying females insist that the practice of binding to flatten their breasts helps them to appear masculine, and it's vital to their mental health and their well-being. Listed on the bottom of a poster advertising for Teen Pride event at the Renton Library are notable sponsors like Chase Bank and the Why Not You Foundation, which was founded by Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson. You know, all these pro quarterbacks and all these pro sports and actors, you know, I'm starting to take a list. And that list is starting to get me to boycott. I don't care who else boycotts it, but I'm already kind of ticked about football. And I'm going to give you know why? Because football can kill kids. We know that there's a mental disease that happens to everyone that plays football. Everyone. 97%. Even from a small hit, they get mental diseases. They can get increased levels of suicide. Now, that may not be too bad for the 2,000 sports, and I'm getting off page here, but it may not be bad for the 2,000 that are paid millions of dollars. Maybe they can take that risk. But there's 2 million kids playing tackle football in the United States. And it's hurting them. And everybody knows it, including the NFL. You know what the NFL commissioner said when they told him about it? He said, yes, we know that we recognize that. But he said that it's dangerous to be on your couch. They told him how dangerous football. He said it's dangerous to be on your couch. Listen, if 97% of the people that came in my couch got brain disease, I'd get rid of my couch. I don't know where that comes from. Along with this, MasterCard to let non-binary genders pick whatever name they desire in their credit cards. So now MasterCard, you can change your name if you don't identify with the name you were born with. TransAge academic says people should be allowed to change their legal age if it doesn't correspond with their experienced age. So there you go. Yeah, look, everybody wants that, don't they? You're 90 years old, but now you're transgender, so you're 17 again. Look in the mirror, you're still 90. It's really kind of strange. So let me give you a list. Let me continue on. Did your child return from college a better person? When assessing America's or any other Western world's universities, wondering whether you should send your child to one, whether you should pay for a child to attend one, or whether you should go into debt to attend one, what type of person does the university produce? My belief, this article writer says, is most of the time colleges today produce a worse human being, or at the very least, a person who is no better, wiser, or more mature than when he or she graduated high school. Let's begin with behavioral issues. There's a good chance your son or daughter will have spent too much of his or her free time at colleges partying, which often means getting drunk, smoking marijuana, and hooking up with someone for casual sex. While none of those activities necessarily means your son or daughter became a worse human being, all of us can agree that none of them made your child a better one. Regarding college drinking, Alcohol Rehab Guide, an online alcohol addiction site reports a giant percentage of college students consume alcohol by binge drinking, which means 4 or more beers for a man within an hour, or 4 or more. It's 5 or more for men in an alcohol binge in 2 hours, and for women it's 4 or more in 2 hours. And it says 80% of college students are binge drinkers. 80%. That's 4 out of every 5. One public health reported in 2013, 1 young adult in 2 has entered university education in Western countries, often is associated with risky behavior such as excessive alcohol consumption. We found that more student was exposed to college environmental factors, the greater the risk of heavy, frequent, and abusive drinking. Alcohol consumption increased for students living on campus, living in a dormitory with a larger number of roommates, and having been in a university for a very long spell increases it. So it says this, Psychology Today. It is neither an exaggeration nor an alarmist to claim that there is a mental health crisis today facing America's college students. Evidence suggests that this group has greater levels of stress and psychopathology than any other time in the nation's history. So now let's move on to value and characters. Did your son or daughter or niece or nephew, grandson or granddaughter return home from college more or less equally kind as a person? More or less respectful to you, his or his parents? More or less equally grateful for you for the monetary sacrifice you made to enable him to attend or her to attend college? More or less equally proud to be an American? More or less equally respectful of religion? More or less equally wise? More or less equally committed to free speech? More or less equally open to hearing views he or she disagrees with? Just ask their parents and other relatives to find out those answers. I acknowledge, he says, that students who are entering STEM, S-T-E-M, which is science, technology, engineering, and math fields, must attend college. But for most of the rest, sending your child to college is playing Russian roulette with their values, their character, and even their joy of life. Very, very sobering. Let me give you a little bit about religion. Still with me tonight? Yeah. Good. Here you go. This one will tick you off. It ticked me off. I want to move to California just to protest this one. California bill will dictate what topics pastors can preach about. Can you imagine anyone dictating to me what I can preach about? I can't. In the latest and most egregious example of attempted government's overreach, California legislators have proposed a bill that would dictate what pastors preach from the pulpit. Specifically, Assembly Concurrent Resolution 99 calls on counselors, pastors, religious workers, educators, and institutions with great moral influence to stop perpetuating the idea that something is wrong with LGBT identities or sexual behavior. ACR 99 also condemns attempts to change unwanted same-sex attraction or gender confusion as unethical, harmful, and leading to high rates of suicide. Put another way, these legislators are telling pastors and spiritual leaders to throw out their Bibles, disregard the Lord's will, ignore the testimony of thousands of ex-gays, and conform to extreme political correctness, or else. Stand by and defy. This is one of the most frontal attacks on our religious freedoms in memory, or perhaps in our nation's history. Those who came out of the closet want to put us in the closet. It's nothing less than the ancient spirit of Jezebel trying to silence God's messengers through fear and intimidation. There is only one way to respond to such spiritual and legal attacks. First, stand up against the bill in order to expose its bias and bigotry. And second, if the bill should actually pass, which might be a long shot even in California, defy it. And here's a great example. In the year 123 AD, the Roman government launched a severe crackdown against the Jews, culminating in 134 AD, when all Jewish practices were forbidden, including circumcision, Torah study, which is the Bible study, and Sabbath observance. So how did the rabbis respond? Once the wicked Roman government issued a decree forbidding the Jews to study and practice the Torah, Pappus ben Judah came by, and upon finding Rabbi Akiva publicly holding sessions in which he occupied himself with the Torah, Pappus asked him, Akiva, are you not afraid of the government? Rabbi Akiva replied, you, Pappus, who are said to be wise, are in fact a fool. I can explain what I am doing by means of a parable. A fox was walking on a riverbank and seeing fishes hastening here and there, asked them, from whom are you fleeing? They replied, from the nets and the traps that are set by men for us. So the fox said to them, how would you like to come up here on dry land, so that you and I may live together the way our ancestors lived with yours? They replied, you, the one they called the cleverest of animals, are in fact a fool. If we are fearful in the place where we can stay alive, how much more fearful should we be in the place where we are sure to die? So it is with us. If we are fearful when we sit and study the Torah, of which it is written, for that is thy life and thy length of thy days, how much more fearful ought we should be should we cease the study of the words of God. That's powerful. You don't ever want to go against what God tells you for a government. Somebody say amen. All right, a couple more. You ready? I actually have some good ones for you tonight. Maybe. I do have some. Here's one. This is not a good one. This is one I want to tell you about, though. This is terrible. HIV outbreak in Pakistani children. Pakistan experiencing another outbreak of HIV among children whose parents do not have the disease. Yet this is not the first HIV outbreak among the children of Pakistan of this late. Public health officials have traced the infections to local medical clinics where health care providers share needles among patients. In Pakistan, HIV infections occur mostly among men who frequent HIV-infected sex workers, prostitutes. When infected individuals seek health care and their blood is tested or they are immunized, the needles are reused for the same purpose with other clients, including children with immature immune systems. As a result, these children whose parents may maintain fidelity in marriage are infected with a deadly sexually transmitted disease. Between March and April of this year, some 1,600 people in one region of Pakistan were affected with HIV, and 75% of them were children. Sexually transmitted diseases like HIV and AIDS are behavior-related diseases and are almost entirely preventable. The best method of preventing these diseases is also the most simple and the most inexpensive. Yet it's not politically correct in our modern world to point it out. However, health and medical experts recognize the preventive power of this completely safe and effective method. Prevention simply requires confining sexual relations to a monogamous marriage between one man and one woman. This method of prevention was revealed in the Bible thousands of years ago and has been proven effective by modern science. So there you have science, the Bible telling you what to do. Let me give you another one, and we'll talk about the Bible. Ebola explodes in Africa again. There are now over 2,000 Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa. Over 1,300 deaths in this current outbreak. The daily number of new Ebola cases has tripled in recent months, according to aid organizations. There are 15 to 20 new cases of the disease every day. And the reason why there is because if somebody contacts Ebola, and by the way, Ebola comes from it's carried by fruit bats. And if a flea from a fruit bat or anything hits you, then you're going to get Ebola. But if you touch somebody who has Ebola, if you touch anything in their body, any of their body fluids, if they have a sweat gland and you touch some of their sweat, you will get Ebola. So even somebody who is dead, if you touch a dead body and there's fluid on it, you will get Ebola. So once introduced into the human population, it usually spreads through contact with blood or other body fluids from an infected person. Even contact with a dead body can spread the disease to those who are living. Great care must be taken to remove and bury the body of a person who dies with Ebola, or the disease can be easily transmitted further. Now here's an amazing fact for you. Anciently, God gave very clear guidelines for the avoiding infection from body fluids of a sick or dead person or an animal. That's in Leviticus 13. These instructions involve the quarantine of a sick person. We're talking about thousands of years ago. And washing thoroughly with water when one touches a dead body or fluids or items of clothing from that body. And also burying them outside the city. Ironically, if these ancient biblical public health practices were understood and followed today, the spread of the infectious disease, including Ebola, would be eliminated. Again, the Bible telling science what to do. Let me give you another one from that. This one is, anybody know what that is? It's a rodent. We don't need to name it, it's a rodent. I'll tell you what it is in a moment. The bubonic plague and eating rodents. Every year, dozens of people still die from the bubonic plague. It's that Black Death that occurred in Europe. Matter of fact, it's probably what happened to the Philistines when they stole the Ark of the Covenant. They were going to give it back to the Jews because they actually drove it down the border of Benjamin, and they built they built 5 golden mice to put on it, and 5 golden, are you ready for this? Hemorrhoids. In your Bible, they're called emerods, bubons. They are pustules. They are growths that come out of your body. They probably got the bubonic plague. They probably associated them with the rodents and sent it back to Israel. But listen to this. So the bacterial plague is associated with unsanitary conditions and is transmitted by rodents and their fleas. Recently, a native couple from Mongolia died of the bubonic plague after eating raw marmot kidneys, triggering a quarantine that left tourists stranded in remote regions for days. Authorities have warned people against eating raw marmot meat, which is a rodent, because it can carry Yersinia pestis, the plague. Some people ignore the warnings because they believe that consuming the inwards of the large rodent is good for their health. I don't know how good it can be if you die from it. In our modern world where most people eat whatever they want, tragic deaths like these should not be a surprise. Yet these deaths are avoidable and preventable because the knowledge of how to avoid this disease has existed for thousands of years. The Bible contains a list of animals that are labeled unclean, not to be eaten by human beings, and that list includes rodents, Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy 14. Although the Bible does not give us the biological basis for these dietary restrictions, the modern science of disease transmission helps us understand why these life-saving prohibitions are recorded in Scripture. So again, you have some things that the Bible are telling you. So, are you ready for the good news? I actually have a little chart that says good news. I actually put it in because I'm so tired of bad news. So here's the first one. I know it doesn't look good, but it is. The U.S. Supreme Court, I'm getting really impressed by the U.S. Supreme Court, has overturned the Oregon Appeals Court ruling permitting the State Bureau of Labor to punish yet another Christian baker. Citing its decision for Masterpiece Cake Shop in Colorado, the court said Oregon's court must reconsider permitting Oregon's Bureau of Labor in Industries to fine a Beaver State bakery $135,000 because it refused to make a cake for a lesbian wedding. So yet again, the High Court delivered a blow against the sexual revolutionaries trying to punish Christians who believe that two members of the same sex cannot be married. Lesbians are upset. Too bad. Oregon's war against normalcy began in 2013 when a pair of lesbians complained that Sweet Cakes by Melissa, owned by Aaron and Melissa Klein, refused to bake a cake for the lesbian wedding. The refusal, which included a message from the book of Leviticus, condemned homosexuals, upset the lesbians. One apparently collapsed in tears on her bed. Oregon's Bureau of Labor and Industries, not surprisingly, ruled that the Kleins discriminated against the Safek plaintiffs, but the court overruled that. You know why? Because they said, you have a voice too. You can speak. You have First Amendment rights, and if you have religious convictions, you can stand on your religious convictions. Aren't you thankful for a Supreme Court that has some conservatives on it? And lastly, this is one of the best pieces of news that I can give you. Lastly is this one. This is happening. Next time I take you to Israel, I'm going to take you here. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and members of his administration gathered in the Golan Heights on Sunday to unveil a sign for the community newly named Ramat Trump, which translates into Trump Heights. He's naming a city after President Trump. He says, it's amazing. He says, we are proud to have the opportunity to establish a new community, Netanyahu said, during the unveiling, and also to honor a big friend. The Prime Minister pushed to rename the existing community in Brukim in commemoration of President Donald Trump's recognition of Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. The area is home to only a few hundred residents. However, Israeli leadership is anticipating the rebranding and will encourage migration. They're going to build apartments there. They're going to build houses there, reported the Associated Press. It's a great recognition of the president's courage and his courageous decision to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. He's the only one that ever has, said David Friedman, the U.S. ambassador to Israel during the ceremony. It's absolutely beautiful. So let's give the Lord a round of applause for that one, because that is great. I'm going to ask the ushers to come forward, and Nancy Campbell, she is here today, and her husband has gone to be with the Lord. We had the service yesterday, and we are proud of you and of your faith for just trusting in God, and we want you to know we love you.